And I think I'm in good health and I'm probably in pretty good shape for my age, but my age is 75. So I'm starting to look for ideas to make the layout easier to build, easier to maintain, and suitable for operating sessions for many years in the future. So I'm just curious who else might have some thoughts on that or maybe some experience they can share with us.
Thanks, Matt. Quick reminder of the rules for tonight. You can unmute yourself, but please mute yourself when you're not talking. Otherwise, the noise gets really bad. So, but like I said, if you've got a comment, please unmute yourself and jump on in.
This is Dave Cochran in Franktown, Colorado. I'm 76, and 8 years ago, I sold my old house, tore down my old railroad, and moved to a larger basement. And unlike my friends that are mostly downsizing, we upsized to get the basement. My wife is 11 years younger than I am, and she is also a railroader. Both of us have been on the OPSIG board in the past. And one of the things that we did on our railroad when we moved from one location to the other that has helped us because of age and less flexibility was to put things higher up. On the old railroad, we had staging 18 inches above the floor and stretching back 30 inches from the fascia. And that was a real problem. By moving everything up, we also got our helix elevated so we can get into it crawling without doing an army crawl like we had to do on the old railroad. So things like that make operations a little bit easier.
Thanks, David.
This is Carl Bloom. I jump in on wiring, and I would bring all the wire to the back of the layout or someplace else, but not underneath. So you can do the wiring either standing up or sitting in a chair.
Yeah, on wiring, I'm lucky. My wife is 4'11". I'm 6'3". So when there's work to do under the railroad, I get my wife to do it. It's a lot easier than me trying to crawl under there.
Make the layout sectional so it's easier to cope with parts as you build it. And then if you have to move it or access any of it, you can do it on a much easier basis. And you can access the layout as you go. I'm 83 and still hanging in there with N scale. So it can be done without too much problem.
Eric Heisen from Phoenix. You might want to consider looking at like the Fremo modular system. They have a number of pretty good guidelines, but the ability to take the layout and build the modules upside down and then flip them back over for the wiring and stuff that has to go underneath is really, I think, a great way to go as they become more mobility limited and site limited.
Andy Keeney from Lansing, Michigan. I was a lone wolf when it came to building a layout, a very large layout. And a couple of years ago, friends started coming over. So now in the last few years, every Tuesday morning from 9, if I provide the donuts and coffee, they show up from 9 to 12. And got some guys that specialize in different areas, been very helpful. I've been getting a lot more stuff done than by myself, and it's a lot of fun having friends working with you.
Andy, you have a great layout. I would go along with the Fremo type idea. I've built a small city with a return loop you go out to and then come back, and then it goes to a fiddle yard. And it allows for operation, and it makes building reasonable size modules versus trying to do everything at once.
By the way, thank you, Casey. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you for having us over to see your layout about a year ago.
Oh, always happy to show it. Thanks.
This is Bruce Morden out in Carpinteria, California. I have a question for you, Matt. Did you save any of your old layout and take it to your new space? The suggestion I kind of have is, what did you really like about your old layout? And are there maybe some sections of the old layout that might be an operational center? I mean, that one of the things that you had was the whole meat packing operation that you had, and there was a lot of operation in a fairly small space. So I'm just wondering if that could answer some of the questions you have.
Yeah, Bruce, I didn't save any geography. I've done that before and found pretty soon you get busy trying to build a layout to hook onto that piece of geography as opposed to a layout that maybe makes more sense. But I did save all of the buildings, including Swift. And I didn't mention it when I first talked, but I have a 16 by 31 room with no obstruction. So I will build around the outside. So I already have a place where I think Swift will go pretty much the way it used to be. And the only large piece that I brought from the railroad was a lumber mill that's 8 feet long, and I could not see any logical way to break it up. And so it'll occupy another place. And after that, I would just start adding the other industries that I brought. And I see that as a great time saver. And I intend to be an industrial switching layout, which was what I had done with my Oregon Coast before we moved. And I really like that. So I think bringing all those pieces, even if it's not geography, will give me a real head start. Yeah.
All righty. Well, hopefully I'm sure you'll make something amazing. And Matt, we'll want to see pictures of it when you when you get it up and running. Let's see, Jerry Hogue, you can unmute yourself and
Right.
go ahead.
Thank you, Eric. Someone had made the suggestion to Matt about putting the wiring on the back side of the layout. Can you kind of describe that some more? Is it in a channel? Is it in something that keeps it contained, or is it just screwed with ties along the back the same way you would do underneath, but instead of being underneath, it's along the back side?
Oh, that was me. I'm Carl Bloom in Charleston, South Carolina. And my layout's a little bit different. The tables are literally 6 feet off the floor, and the operating area is 3 feet off the floor. So the partition between the under the layout and the operating area is a plywood wall. So I'm wiring overhead, and then I bring the wires down, and they're all on the wall. And I worked at Bosch, an industrial company that made workstations, and they had all these really cute things like these rings for wiring. And you string the wire along and string it from hook to hook. The one thing I would highly recommend in wiring is do not drill holes through the frame and start threading the wire through all these holes. I mean, that's just tedious. Like you say, a trench or a container. I've also used some of those in big electrical panels, they have these combs. And you run the wire through the comb and then you just pull it out where you need it. Keeps things neat. Of course, the color coding and labeling the wires is nice. And then, group them by purpose. Like there's a bunch of circuit boards, and those are all connections for the turnout controls. And on those, I used RJ15 telephone connectors. So if I have a turnout control or a turnout motor goes bad, it's a plug replacement, not a wiring job. And then I was also lucky to be able to use, I would buy these surplus electrical cabinets. So I have industrial terminal strips. So pretty much I try to stick to, one wire per terminal position. So, if you pull out a wire, you're not pulling out 5 wires and trying to remember where they all go back in. So,
Yeah, I used to do some work in industrial settings, and so was used to putting wires in channels that had the cap, and the labeling is a big part of that too, as far as tracing wires. So you're suggesting that when you come from the back to some point on the layout, that you're basically making a trench in the foam to bury the wire?
Yeah, I guess that would do.
I mean, what do you do? If you got to come from the back where your wiring channel is to a switch on the front.
Yeah. The other thing I do is most of the, like the turnout controls, my control panels have very little internal wiring. It's a switch, the wire goes out of the panel to the terminal strip where it's fastened.
Hey, Carl, Casey Bertman out in Walterboro. I've used Anderson power pole hubs at the back of modules, and I only have basically 2 buses running. One is for my DCC, and another is a DC 12 volt for my turnouts. And so I'll just have the 2 bus wires running behind my module. I'm 6'3", so it's hard to get underneath layouts for me to work as well. So I'd much rather have it in the back. Saves a lot of bumps on the head.
That's nice. Those Anderson, those are those heavy duty DC connectors that like model RC car people use.
The 30 amp, they make a 15, a 30, and a 60. I'm not sure if RC car, I just don't do it. I'm not sure they use them, but they are industrial hookups. And then I use 12 gauge wire for my buses.
Yeah, that sounds nice. Oh yeah, let's see. Yep.
Those what you're talking about, Casey?
Yep, that's it. But I've got little 3D printed hubs that I put in the back of a module, and then I'll have one side glued into that hub, and they just got to hook the module, the bus wire into the module.
I'm gonna find where I use these on a removable section in front of my circuit breaker panel. So that way I can just plug into the bus wire for the 2 tracks, because I've got detection in it too. So.
Yeah, when I go on layout tours, I always want to look underneath the table and see the construction and the wiring.
I will add on the Anderson power poles, crimping them correctly is absolutely required. We have them on, I do modular railroading for the N-track modules. And we have, on a fairly regular basis, our 12 volt AC power bus melts the connectors because someone didn't crimp them correctly, or the connection becomes a high resistance connection and it just creates too much heat. So, in power applications, it might be best to use the 45 amp connectors because they're a little bigger and a little easier to crimp.
Yeah, the actual crimpers from Anderson are rather expensive. There are knockoffs. I've never had a problem using the knockoff versus I think the Anderson one is actually like $125 for the crimper.
Yeah, for people who aren't familiar with these, the wire, let's see if we can zoom in here. So the wire basically goes into the end of this, you crimp it down around the wire very, very, very carefully. And then this piece basically goes into the black or the red. I mean, you can get them on all different colors, but it basically goes in there. So when you've got the two ends, it almost reminds me of a USB cable. You've got one on the top, one on the bottom. They only fit together one way, and that gives you a good solid connection. But yeah, I destroyed several of these metal ones when I was first trying to figure out how to make them work. So I got a whole bunch of plastic, and I'm like short 3 or 4 pairs of the metal ones from not doing it properly. So
That's everybody's story.
yeah, but these are, I think this is the Fremo standard now, if I'm not mistaken. They got away from the previous type and switched to this. I don't know the specific spec, but that's where I got the idea.
I'd like to say from an electrical standpoint, if you're having melting down situations, you probably have situations you should have better circuit breakers or fuses in the process.
No, it was a direct result of the two halves of the Anderson not getting good solid connection. And they would get bent or caught in the spring inside the housing, and they would just barely touch, and that would create the heat. It's only a local short. I mean, we're running a 12-volt lighting system, and we're pushing upwards of 30 amps through those connectors. So we're pushing the limits of those connectors, and even the slightest little improperly assembled connector will melt the connectors. Once we find them, it's easy, just fix them, and then they work forever after that.
2 comments on the power pole. I got my crimper through an amateur radio supply for about $35, made for power poles, and it works great. I've been debating on putting a 12-volt DC line in, and being an engineer, if I'm going to push 25 or 30 amps, I'm definitely going to go to 45 amp connectors. You want a safety factor. So, a good percent of your wattage.
Yeah, just like the I mean, $27 for the right tool. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer, but I know I'm sure there's the official tool is a lot more expensive. I got the same thing when I was doing and I'm sure somebody's going to yell at me for this, the genuine 3M Scotch lock connectors. There is a specific tool you use to get a nice even crimp on that, and I haven't had a problem with any of them. But if you try to do it with lineman pliers or something, they never quite go right. So I sprung for the tool that gives you a nice even compression. I think it was like a $50 tool, but it's definitely worth the money.
One thing you could do with those power poles is after you make the connection and before you put any voltage onto it, even a simple multimeter test, you should have absolutely zero ohms resistance. I'm in the electrical field, and there are certain pretty expensive meters you can use that run up the power and give you micro ohms and all this other stuff. But just a simple ohm check on it right across the power pole could indicate whether you've got a good connection or not.
For my home layout, I've completely switched over to the Wago lever lock connectors. There's no tools needed, just single connector handles, very small to very heavy wire gauges, and you don't throw them away or you know, when you use them once. There you can just, if you need to troubleshoot something, you can flip the lever and disconnect the wires and reconnect it if you need to do that. So, you know, they're a little more expensive, but in the long run, they're just way less headaches.
And I just had reconditioning a sailboat. One of the things we do in the sailboat is speaking of accessing your wiring, all the panels that I've done so far are flipped down in the front. So you stuff all your wires in the flip down panel. When you need them, you pull the front panel down. So that would be your lower boards on your layout. So you could just pull that down, play with your wires, push it back up, a couple of quarter turn screws, and you're done. Just a thought.
All right, there's a couple other suggestions, and we're going to move on about soldering your Anderson connectors after doing the crimping. Get the right tool. Like I said, there looks like there's a special insertion tool that can make that a little bit easier than trying to jam the thing in. There's Amazon has several different tools that will work on those, but as somebody said, always go higher rating for the thing if there's any question. But okay, so we've got a question from Gordon or Gene Spaldy. Those using train order signals, static display or functional? If functional, how control signal, dispatcher panel, toggle switch, motorized or manual? I'm going to throw this to Andy Keeney, because I know you've got those. So if you don't mind sharing, Andy, I'd appreciate it.
No, I'll be more than happy to. Let me change something here. Virtual background. None. Okay, I'll move out of the way. If you can see, I can't zoom in, but the panel right here is on the dispatcher's desk, and it controls all the train order boards, which are just lighted signals, LEDs, green, red. We didn't figure we needed a yellow. Anyways, the dispatcher has control. There's toggles, so he can throw a board up at any station, either north or south. He controls them, and after the engineer contacts him, tells him he's got his orders, then he can just flip it back green and they can continue on. It's worked pretty well for us, as long as the guys remember to look at the lights. So a lot of times it's just kind of forgotten. You're having to make, you know, your OSs and everything. So you get a little behind, but it has worked out well for us.
Hey, Andy, this is a picture I took on your layout back a few years ago. I believe that's one of your train order signals.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I homemade these things, and a lot of them didn't hold up very well. They got plastic parts and a brass tube. So that part worked all right, but all the little detail parts kind of worked them over.
Let me see if I've got I don't know if I've got a picture of your signal board or not. I don't think I do. Nope, but got the signal anyway. So
okay, all right.
So toggle switch for Andy's layout. Anybody else doing train order signals? Like I said, yours are just signal like a light, right? You don't have any sort of motorized.
No, I'd love to have
semaphore, but
yeah, I'd like to have semaphores, but we've got several stations across the railroad, so that would get a little expensive. And we're looking at maybe going CTC in certain sections too. So
whoever was going to say, was that you, John?
Yeah, I pulled mine. We used to go timetable and train order, and now we're CTC, and I actually ended up pulling them. They were semaphore controlled with the servos controlled by Tam Valley Depot, and the dispatcher would just hit a button, and it would send the semaphore up to alert the crew, and then the crew would blast right on by it and ignore it. So
Yeah.
So we end up pulling them. They say, wait, why am I stopping right here? Well, that's a train order.
Yeah.
Oh,
You have something, it's red. You need to stop and figure it out.
dispatcher wants to talk to you. But that was pretty simple. It's just a semaphore went up and down with a servo underneath the layout.
Yeah. All right. So Gordon or Gene, hopefully that's, oh, Bruce, go ahead.
So we tried something even easier. I stole a graphic from the Operations Roadshow. They have a printout that you can do for little flagman. And I took a graphic for a train order signal and replaced the flagman with the train order signal. So we can fold it up. It's just a little paper train order signal. And it's nearby the stations, the train order stations. And if there needs to be a train order given to the crew, then the operator has to walk over to the station. They set it on the tracks, and all the trains have to stop for the signal and find out if they have an order or not. But it's real inexpensive. Just you print it out on your printer and you fold up 20 of these things and you got plenty of them to put around.
Yep. Or you could use, I think it was on Bruce Carpenter's old layout where you have the paper signals just sort of stuffed into a little place. Same concept, just simple.
Yeah, I'll try and see if I have it accessible and put it in the chat.
Eric?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just bought those showcase miniature train order signals, which is kind of the reason I asked. And they look really nice, like pretty delicate. So I was wondering, that's why I wondered if people just use them as a static display, and the guy realized that if there's supposed to be a train order, they'll stop for it. So that's kind of why I was it was my whole interest on the whole thing. So
yeah, I think you could certainly wire them up. I mean, that's unless you just have like a standing order that if you see one of these, you need to stop. Right? I mean,
okay, that sounds good.
That this is an indicator. If you see a train order signal, just tell them to stop and check with the operator at the station for an order.
So just leave it as a static display then.
That'd be one way to go. But like I said, I think you could certainly wire it up. I don't know that particular switch, but
okay. Yep. Thank you.
All right. Let's see. There's a question from Frank about. I have a question about engines during switching. Can you have cars on both ends while moving, and if so, for how far? Well, I guess there's a lawyer answer. It depends. If you've got 25 feet of railroad, you've got a lot of room for cars, but I think what Thomas answered, I would think as long as the shoving protection of the movement is protected, you can have cars on both sides of the engine for as long as you want. Obviously, there's going to be issues if you're trying to push real lightweight cars or, a mix of light and heavy. It could get problematic. You could end up with them on the ground. But Frank, if you want to clarify your question, or if anybody else wants to jump in, please do so.
Yeah, it's just as I'm out switching, there are times when the easiest way to do it is to, you're running around your train, you got some in the back, you got some in the front. So have 3 or 4 cars on either end and you're sort of pushing up and down the main line to get to the switches and stuff. I don't know if that's legal or if I should just have cars on one end of them when I'm doing that.
As far as legal, I mean, I don't know that for sure. It seems like it's practical.
I'm Craig Townsend out of Seattle area. I spent a few years working for the BN or the BNSF. It's perfectly acceptable to do that kind of a move as long as you provide protection. So you'll see locals sometimes run, half a mile down the track with somebody on the tail end providing protection.
There you go. It's legal.
Thank you.
It's your railroad, so you can kind of do what you want.
Yeah, basically the rule of thumb is anything goes as long as you have somebody looking at the end of it. Short lines will sometimes use like a guy in a truck. If you have a 5-man crew, you can just have somebody standing there and shove to you. But as long as there's somebody that's got eyes on the end of the shove, then it's perfectly fine. And from a locomotive standpoint, it doesn't really matter either.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Let's see. Jared asking, are there other places to chat and share info with the group other than the groups.io list and the Facebook forums and interchange? And this sounds bad, me being a tech guy, but I actually don't spend a lot of time in interchange. I've been in there. I think it's promising, but it's I'm too interrupt driven. If I have to exit it completely, otherwise it just pings me all day long and I can't get anything done. But yeah, the groups.io list, the RY, we need a better name for that. The RY Ops Industrial SIG, that's a good, that's essentially the de facto OpSig discussion group. I'll say unofficial because we don't monitor or police it. Bruce Wilson handles the moderation of it. I'm an admin on it as well. I've helped out a couple times, but we don't provide any moderation. The Facebook groups, I'm sure there are, the Facebook or the OpSig page is just a page. We'll put stuff up and you can discuss it there. The various model railroad groups, I'm in several. There's the NMRA Facebook group. If other people have, obviously in person is where a lot of the chatting goes on, but if other people have suggestions, please throw them out. I'll put in a plug for the Twin Cities Division podcast that talks a lot about operations. Thomas Gasior, I don't know if you want to put in a plug for your program, since you were kind enough to have me on a couple of weeks ago. Or not.
Well, for what it's worth, thank you. I'm already subscribed to the podcast and already all of the other groups that you've mentioned. So thank you very much. I just, with me being new, I have a gazillion questions and I want to soak up as much information as I can. So thank you.
Sure. A couple other things if you haven't gotten a copy of the Operations SIG compendium book.
Does it look like this?
There you go. Look at that. You can model it for the group there, Vanna. You can. We still have lots of them. We'd like to move them out.
I've got stuff tabbed in this thing. I don't know if you can see these or not, but I'm soaking it up like a sponge because I'm loving it.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great book.
Can those be ordered from the OpSig website?
Kind of. They actually go through. You send your payment to payments@opsig.org, but then you need to send your information. Let me find the page here. Hold on.
Jared, I'm like you. I'm brand new and reading all the time and watching things.
I'm going to drop a link in the chat. This is a public link. It has the instructions on how to order. You can basically send your payment. There's notes on that page with the explanation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's $49.95 plus shipping. Send your payment down, and Steve will get you a copy. Toot sweet.
All right.
Excellent. It's a great resource, Jerry.
Yeah. I wish we had something like this in the website, 20 years ago when I first started dabbling in the hobby. If something like this had been around, I'd be light years ahead of where I am now. So hats off to you contributors.
Yeah, so there's a link there for the Crossing Gate podcast. Thomas, the episode you guys just did about following the rules, I thought that was particularly good. That comes up a lot. But yeah, I think that's a great resource. And then the other references, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. There are probably some semi-private groups out there for various railroads that might have information. But that's going to be kind of, well, if they're private groups, you're not going to find them on Facebook. But we try to at least share stuff that we find to the public page. So, all right. Let's see. If you look in the chat, the Operations Roadshow paper Flagman. I'll share the screen here so you can see it. This was the little Flagman that they used for the Operations Roadshow. Little dude there. And then you basically print it out. Here's the PDF. So you get like 100 of them. Fold them in half. Stick them on your train. Stick them on your track, and Bob's your uncle. You got Flagman. So you could use that at your stations. Bruce, go ahead.
I was going to make a correction on the compendium and
Oh.
and kind of recruit. If you're a member of the OPSIG, the compendium's only $40 plus shipping.
Yeah. It's on the ad there.
Yeah.
$39.95 for members, $49.95 for non-members. So, but the thing is, the digital subscription is only $10. So, you get the digital subscription, get 4 issues plus access to everything on the website, the entire back catalog, and you basically it pays you back when you buy the book. So
Exactly.
that's a good deal. All right.
Hey, Eric, going back to the Flagman, a neat thing that Joe Bulger did was he has a division point, and on one division point, he's got Flagman with the brown shirt and orange pants, and on the east side, it's orange shirt and brown pants.
Yeah.
So when you change divisions, you have to change your flaggers that go with your train.
Oh, that's funny. I haven't been to his layout in probably 10 years, but I've got a bunch of pictures of it.
So
This was
Eric,
kind of overwhelming for a first-time visitor. So, but yeah,
Eric,
here,
if you let me share my screen for just a moment, let me show what I
here,
did for the graphic.
So this is one of the Flagmen this is on Joe Bulger's layout up near Warsaw. So the little Flagman's kind of hanging out by the office.
That's Inner Bay Yard in Seattle.
Yep. And he's got them kind of scattered all over the place. But yeah, you can go ahead and share. Let me stop mine and go ahead, Bruce.
I'm trying to get the share page again. Hang on a second. Oh, I know what's happening.
Let's see, a couple comments here. Seth Gartner's New York Central had red or green pieces of paper pinned at stations to denote yes, no, stop for order. I think that's a great idea. Very simple.
So the train order signal just looks like this. It's the same space as the Flagman. And I just take that graphic and I paste it where the Flagman was. And I print out the same page and I get a ton of train orders. Then you fold it up and it stands up by itself and you just use it. Make sense?
Yep.
All right. I'm off.
There was a, there you go. Let me drop this in the chat. This was from, this was from Bruce Carpenter's layout. If you go to I mean, this is basically high quality. You can print this out. But down on the bottom, there are, you want to go semaphores, you want Union Pacific, Norfolk Southern, BNSF. I mean, any signal you want. There's probably more out there, but in his case, he just prints it out and then has a little holder for it. This would also work for a train order signal. Just here's a green, here's a red, ready, set, go. So that's in the chat as well. Thomas, will there be an OPSIG meetup at Springfield Train Show? Is that the one out in Massachusetts? The Amherst one, or is that a different one? I'm not aware of anything specific for OPSIG. We haven't promoted that. John, I know I'm going to be in Arizona when the Fort Wayne convention is going on. We sent it out on train show list today.
There's going to be a change. Right now, we're limiting people to, and I never agreed with this policy, but it went through. We're limiting people to signing up for only 2 operating sessions. And that's going to be changed tomorrow. So we're going to open up all the operating sessions to the limit. So we'll talk to you about that on operatingsessions.com too.
Sure. If you happen to be anywhere near Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is at the northeast corner of Indiana, the North Central Region NMRA convention is happening in about a month, and they are doing operating sessions at all of the various railroads. Is there still room at the hotel?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So the link is in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
At this point, I guess we're after. So it's $75 or $85.
I
It's
think
on the
it's
early bird rate.
Yeah, I think we're on the early bird. I'll have to look.
Yeah,
I'm so
early bird
close.
was before September 15th. So
Right.
but some nice layouts up there.
It's 85 now. Well, no, wait a minute. NMRA member after September 15th is 75. Before September 15th, it was 60. And then non-MRA,
Yeah, at this
NMRA.
point, if you're NMRA, it's $75. If you're not, it's $85.
Right.
Jared, you talking about Boomer? I think you're talking, I mean, it's like okay Boomer. Is that what you're referring
No,
to?
not like as in a baby boomer, as in like somebody who goes to somebody else's home and operates, and works on their other layout.
I haven't heard that term. Just the pejorative okay Boomer. Let's
Okay.
get you back.
All right. So all right. So they're not using it in a technical perspective. They're using it in a age perspective.
Yeah, I haven't heard it. We'll leave it up to the group though.
I think that's a derivative of the real railroad. Somebody who would go from division to division would be a boomer.
Okay.
Or would travel to operate. I'm not sure if it's division or what, but that's probably where that came to use.
That's how I've heard it.
Thank y'all.
My understanding was it was railroad to railroad, not division to division, but
okay.
Hey, real quick, somebody was talking about the is it the Wago connectors earlier? Is this
That was me.
Is this basically like a 5-way join between like the one I've got up on the screen? Is this essentially joining all 5 of those wires together? Is that what that does?
Yeah, all 5 of those are connected. They come in like, I think 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s.
Yeah, grabbed one here.
This is the one that I think is more useful, and you can see on the side of it,
Oh, hold on.
that one shot you had showed the wire gauges. They hold a very wide range. There you go. Back up one. There you go.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, wow. 20 to 10 gauge. That's impressive.
Yeah. And you can open them. They don't cut the wire. You strip the wire and
Just crimp it or just clamp it.
Just, flip the lever shut and it holds it in there. And if you got to fix something or check out or look for a short, you just open it up to let the wires back out again. And
I think I've seen these at Menards before, but had no idea what they were for.
Yeah, I think they tighten if you try to pull the wire out latching.
yeah, they really hold tight. It's very, I don't know that I've ever been able to pull a wire out.
Yeah. And I think they're available in 2 and 3 conductor sets too.
Yeah.
I've seen some, it's a three-way connection for 3 different conductors.
Yeah, there's other brands now too, but Wago is the one that made them famous, I think.
And some are made for solid wire and some are made for stranded too. It used to be back when I was an electrician.
Oh, okay. I pulled one up in Menards and it said talk about a sticker shock here. It's like,
they're not cheap.
Wago splicing connector, 24 to 12 aggregate, $22. I'm like, for one? Holy crap. And then you click.
They're a lot cheaper than that.
Amazon's the place to get them.
50 pack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazon, Amazon, they have a whole package of a collection of 2, 3, 4 out to 6 for about $20.
But is it the real ones or is it some?
Yeah, no, it's real Wago.
Eric, that's a 50 pack you're looking at.
Oh, I realized that. It was just the first screen didn't have the 50 on it. So that's clever.
I've talked to some guys in Florida that are using them consistently in the very humid climate with no problem for multiple years.
Very cool. Yeah, it looks like I said, it's it's basically instead of having to do the soldering, is there like a pass-through one? Thinking like the suitcase connectors have got, you're basically clamping onto a bus, but they've probably got one of those too where the wire.
There's one with an open back, but I don't know that it's really meant to pass the wire through.
Yeah. I guess you basically just have, instead of the wire running through, it's basically 2 wires come in, one goes out, and that instead of it, just
that's why the 5 is useful because you got 2 just to.
Yep.
Eric, that pack says
or 3 for that matter. Yeah. I figured out my error here. As I said, it was just the first screen I popped up. It looked like it was $22 per. So like that'd be a little bit much. I can solder for a little bit less than that. So all right, let's see what other questions we've got. Where is the back? Let's see. Oh, Doug put up a railroad slang glossary. That's good to. Let's see. Observed about 30 years ago was a boxcar on the nose of a local coming off the NNW at Concord. Could have been a mile or more for the shove. Observed on local short line shove over a mile because the yard is essentially a passing siding in Maine. So back for the question about whether you can shove both directions or not. So all right. What other questions, discussion ideas do we have?
I have one on passengers.
Go for it.
Okay, we're just getting into passenger train operations on my railroad. We're still working on the terminal area. My thought is, first of all, we're going to have a lot of head-end traffic. I've got a very large REA complex and a large post office, one on each side of the passenger station. So we're going to have a lot of switching in that. Some of the guys like the idea of just using a switch list for passenger trains. We use car cards for freight. I'm thinking more that I would probably be better off using car cards and not dealing a switch list when you're sending several cars to different locations as you're working. You know, keeping track of them. You have slots for the box, so you know, or the car cards, so you know exactly where the car is, rather than looking on the list and then having to go find it. Well, I'm just wondering what people have done with passenger trains. Treat them same way or gone the switch list?
Or you could do a mix. I know you could do the whole, like if you're not going to switch the passenger cars, that could be like a block car, but then like the head end cars could each have their own card. I've seen that on railroads where we've run passenger trains. You had a card for the milk car that you've got to drop off, but the rest of the train is considered non-switched. That might be another idea. But what ideas do you have for Andy?
On my railroad, I run passengers and I have the head end cars and I have car cards for the head end cars. The passenger cars don't have any car cards for them. So the packets, the locomotive, the freight, the express box cars that are going to be switched, and that's it.
Do you have anything showing, you know, a switch list or a list showing the cars in the train?
I don't have a switch list. The locomotive, and for instance, I have a locomotive and I have 3 express box cars behind it. I have the car card package is the locomotive car card, and then each of the freight cars or express box cars has a car card with a 4-sided waybill. When it leaves my passenger yard, it says the waybill says I'm leaving from in Miami, and I'm going to drop this first freight car off in Vero Beach, the second one in Melbourne. The third one goes to the staging yard, and then it gets dropped off on the way southbound when that train runs southbound. Now, when the train comes into Miami, it tells you where the express box cars are supposed to be put. I have a passenger yard master that does the switching. So it's the engineer. He brings his train to the Miami station. He stops. He's done. Then the passenger yard master, he takes the engine to the service facility. He wires the passenger cars, and the head end equipment he delivers to wherever they're supposed to go, which is usually the siding where the different express agencies are.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things I'm planning on is having a lot of interchange, even with the passenger equipment, adding diners, you know, removing diners and such. So, you know, to keep track of the cars, I could have a list of the cars in the train and have head end car cards, as you say, but some cars will actually be removed. Passenger cars will be removed and placed on other trains or set up to be placed on other trains as they come through.
Do you run an instruction sheet with your train?
All my freight trains I do.
Because on my passenger trains, I have an instruction sheet that says you need to look in the pickup slot at this station or this station, because there may be a car to pick up and you may be dropping something off. Check your car cards. And then that would, so I have instructions for important things along the route for each train.
Okay. Yeah, so you're talking about en route. I'm looking at a passenger terminal with probably 3 people, a yard man or a terminal master and or station master, and 1 or 2 crews, yard crews working the terminal.
Okay, I just have the 1 passenger yard master who does the switching of the express cars in the yard.
Right. Well, it gives me some thought. We can always start out with the head-end traffic. And if we start having trouble with the passenger cars themselves, we can always look at that and add those. I appreciate your thoughts, Chuck.
Oh, anytime.
Yeah, I was gonna say for other people, I mean, I've also seen that when you come into a station, if you don't want to get too complicated, it's like, okay, swap your head end car for the one that's waiting here and just back and forth, just to add a little operations. But I think a car card for the head end car, I think that'd be a great idea. Somebody was asking, doesn't use a switch list versus car card depending on what you want to model. Actually, it doesn't. The switch list versus car card, that's just a organizational tool. It really doesn't matter. I mean, car cards aren't a thing in the real world anyway, right? They actually have a real waybill, or a manifest that would go with the train to know where that car is going. So that's just really a modeling conceit. But let's see.
If I can, Eric.
Yeah, go ahead.
Since I did use ProTrack for many years before the designer developer passed away, and I was having trouble getting it to work correctly for me because of the size of my railroad and the amount of different railroads and the traffic patterns. Bob Butler, who's here also, he still uses ProTrack and it works well for him. So, they do work for you, and I think JMRI would be the same way. The biggest thing I had a problem with was getting the routing that I wanted. The computer doesn't necessarily want to do what you want it to do. It just sees what the possible routes are and decides to send them those routes. And you might not have that in mind, but it's really hard dealing with it. The other thing that used to upset me, I'd have a train or waiting for a train to depart northbound, 25 cars, and the program would only give me 10 cars. And I see 25 cars sitting there. So that was a constant battle for me. And any kind of interchange work en route, you could end up with several sheets of paper, and it just got too much. So I'm very happy with car cards now, but I was happy overall with the switch lists before I asked it to do too much for me.
Yeah. Let's say, Jerry, I was going to say, as far as dropping and picking up passenger cars, sleepers along the route, yeah, I mean, that's certainly something you could account for. If you're doing that and you're mixing it up, then a car card or a switch list, you basically have to do that, so that the system knows where the cards are. Or, either with the switch list, typically it's computer generated, at least the switch list I use these days. JMRI or whatever software is saying, okay, these cars need to go here. You could also have a simple rule where you basically say, okay, my Amtrak is coming through. I'm simulating the one, the Empire Builder. Okay, take the last 3 cars, leave them in the siding and continue. And then the train coming the other direction, pick up these 3 cars and keep going, right? That'd be a real simple way to simulate that. But all right.
Just a thought. Do you find a lot of people still using car cards, or are switches getting a lot more popular with JMRI and such, and you see more people going to that these days?
I think it depends where you're at. I mean, I was just up in Rockford a couple of weeks ago, and I think everybody up there is still they use the so-called Rockford card, which is basically kind of here's the places you go, and you essentially just put your initials in the columns going down, and it kind of that's what they use out there. But I think car cards certainly is pretty popular still. I'll leave it open to the group. Mike O'Neill says more people staying on car cards in Colorado.
Yeah, this is Dave Cochran, also in Colorado. And I have a little prototype experience on New York Central and Penn Central. And I got to say, I never got off a caboose with a deck of cards to go switch cars. And it just drives me crazy. And the people that want to be rivet counters and whatnot that use car cards just drives me crazy. I mean, they want to be prototypical, and yet they're switching with a deck of cards. And
Yeah.
for Andy Keeney's comments about, I think he was still talking about ProTrack, and I bought ProTrack back in the day, but never used it because it couldn't make it work. But as far as getting trains to take the route that you want, I use JMRI, and it's a little complex at times, but it has a wonderful diagnostic system where it produces a report that tells you everything that the software was doing and why it's doing it. So if you have trains going the wrong way or taking the wrong route, you can look at that report, and there's all kinds of tools you can use to force it to take the route you want. But to me, car cards are crazy. I agree with Mike. Mike operates on my railroad occasionally. Most of the people around here seem to use car cards, and I don't for the life of me know why, except some people are just allergic to computers.
I can say one good thing about car cards is it's really, if you're trying to build something or lay stuff out in the yard, it's like, okay, card, and you can kind of, sort them out that way. But as opposed to having a list, but that's just, I'm constantly dropping them. Once I've left a yard and I'm out of the sorting, the sorting stage. It's great for sorting, but to have to deal with them on the road, it's like, okay, unclip the great big binder clip, flip through, flip. But as I said, it's a preference. We don't want to get into religious debates here because that gets ugly.
Might I comment, Ed Koval, Brandon, Florida. I'm in a local operating group, and I want to defend car cards to some extent. When you operate on 4 or 5 different railroads, and each one has a little bit of a different scheme, and I'm not a railroader by trade, I'm a helicopter pilot. I appreciate the car cards because it gives me a roadmap of what I'm supposed to do. And when I'm at the next guy's railroad, I don't remember the names of the sidings and the towns and what have you. And I appreciate any written information I can conveniently carry with me while I'm wandering around with the train. And also, I find myself on occasion when I'm doing switching, doing puts and takes, and somebody asks me a question about something else, and I answer it, and I go back, and I don't know where I am, unless I happen to have the car cards laid out in the order that I think I want to do things.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
Yeah, and yeah, Eric, you're right. It's obviously a choice. It's a religious discussion, but the flexibilities, right? Dave is right with, you get all the reports, you can run simulations and software, there's more loading up front, but you have the flexibility. Dave and I are kind of stuck sometimes that we want to build a train to get some extra cars out, but you can't necessarily without extra stuff. But on the flip side, the software says you don't need extra cars because your yard has capacity and it has overfilled it. So it's so many choices.
Yeah. Well, and then there's variations on a theme. Like I said, there's the so-called Rockford card. There's the car order system that's popular up in Michigan. That's what I'm using, where you're dealing with a car type and not a car number. And then 100 other variations. So, but as we said on the various videos, the point is to get something going, start moving the freight, move it with purpose, and have fun. If it's causing if it's causing you to sweat, not like it, and not want to do it, well, then it's probably wrong.
And there you go,
yeah.
Eric.
There's
Yeah,
a great. Oh, that's
there you go, Eric. That's laying them out in the yard, right?
that's a great. There you go. That is a great picture right there for everybody
Hey,
else.
Eric, if I can jump in for 1 second.
Yeah,
my,
go ahead.
My presentation that you've got scheduled for December 10th is how I switched from car cards to JMRI in my layout. So I'm sure I'll have an equal opportunity to offend everybody's sensibilities on that one.
Hey, that's the best. If you're not offending somebody, you must not be doing anything interesting.
And he'll do both at the same time. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if car cards were good enough for Bruce Chubb's railroad, they're probably good enough for the sad little thing I call a railroad down in the basement. But anyway. All right. Well, we're go ahead.
Can I jump in, Eric? It's
Yeah, go
John
ahead.
Wagner. John Wagner from Baden, Ontario. I haven't operated in JMRI, but I have operated on a couple of computer systems. My biggest complaint was when you brought a train into a yard, it didn't tell you how to break it up. It was just put it into the yard, and then you cherry picked when you needed to build a train up. With car cards, every time you bring a train in, your card tells you where that car is going to go next, and you can do your sorting when you arrive.
Actually, the JMRI can do what you're talking about.
Yeah, I haven't operated in JMRI. I've operated on a couple of other.
I don't know. Well, I'm saying that the switch list with JMRI can tell you, okay, this block of cars is going to, station or town A, they should go on this track. Now that requires the layout owner to set that up in the yard. But, if you're blocking your train and so on, then that makes it easier for the switch, the yard master and the yard engineers to sort that out. But yeah, there's definitely setup required. I mean, I'm doing car orders, and so my main yard will have, I think it's got 8 bowl tracks, 2 arrival departure, but it's long enough you can work both ends. So we'll say, okay, this is the cars for these places can go on each of these tracks, and they'll have slots for the cards. So, but
Eric, on my railroad, we have 2,500 square feet, 2 fairly major classification yards, and all the classification is set up in JMRI. I'm a little bit of an odd duck in JMRI because I print all of the paperwork before the session. And I found a way to do that works very well. The yard masters have a switch list that tells them what trains are coming in, what cars are coming off that train, what tracks those cars go on. And then when they're building a train, it comes usually from a single track or one end and north end or south end, whatever.
Yeah, I thought it could do that. I mean, it's pretty powerful. So I was pretty sure it could do that. So
yeah, it absolutely will, and it works well.
You just again, with all of this, you just have to go through the setup process. So
I even have crews that come in and they'll block the train before they get back to the yard to help the yard out because they already see the switch order list. So the local comes back sorted for the yard master.
Well, that's certainly a good idea if you can. If you have the time to block the cars as you're picking them up, that certainly helps out. It's not always possible, but I think that's generally preferred. So, Jerry, go ahead. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing some more from David Cochran about his experience on the prototype. I work with some guys here in the West Lafayette area from whom I'm learning, and some of them actually work for the railroad. One of them is still working for the railroad, but he's kind of described the process that, say, a crew coming in to the yard or the station to pick up their train for their shift. The conductor would actually sit down and organize some paperwork and kind of create his switch list, as Eric said, as a tool for that shift on what they needed to do with that particular train. But like I said, that's where I would love to hear some more from David Cochran about what they did in real life.
David, sounds like an invitation to speak at a future virtual meetup. How about that?
Back in the 60s is when I worked for New York Central. I worked for them the last year that they were an entity, and then I worked for the Penn Central their first year. And I was a brakeman when I worked for New York Central, and a fireman when I worked for Penn Central. So I've been on both ends of the train. My experience braking is that the conductor did all the paperwork in the caboose. He handled the waybills and all that kind of stuff, and he wrote the switch list for us, especially for local freights. You know, through freights, I ran from Toledo, Ohio to Elkhart, Indiana, and local freights, you'd get a switch list at every town you stopped in to service industries. Those were handwritten by the conductor on the caboose back in 65 era, 66, 67. And, I never, like I said, never got off with a deck of cards. The conductor took care of it. That was his job. If we got in a bind where we needed 3 people to pass signals or whatever, the conductor would get off the caboose and help us. We had 2 brakemen and a conductor, and he'd help out when we needed a 3rd man. Otherwise, he stayed in his office and did the paperwork while myself and the other brakeman did the work.
Thanks, David.
Eric, it's Andy. I'd just like to say howdy to Ed Colville, a fellow rotorhead. But I say he walked away, I know.
All righty. Well, we're at 8:15. It's been a great discussion. I mean, a lot of people. Sounds like if this is of interest, we'll do it again next month. The date. We have the other one scheduled for the 8th, so this one will be the 22nd. And like I said, we'll publish this up to YouTube. You got your assistant there, Andy. We'll get this published up, and like I said, next time bring your questions, bring your thoughts, bring your ideas, and want to thank everybody for coming. And everybody have a good evening. Happy operating.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.